Okay, I have started the recording and I want to say welcome everybody to this session called Basics of Teaching and Learning Part 1, Cognition and Motivation. I am your host, Larry Davies, and I will introduce myself in just a second a little bit more. First of all, for people who are here, if you can open the Zoom chat, you'll want to open the chat, you'll want to click on the More menu down at the bottom of your screen on your Zoom navigator. And in More, you should see something that says chat. That will open the Zoom group chat window. And then I am pasting in two ways to get into the interactive slides that you can see me sharing on your screen. The first way is to click directly on that link, or you can just open a new browser window in your browser, type in nearpod.com and enter that code V as in victory, Z, J, F, C as in Charlie. So that's victory, zebra. In fact, I don't know how to say those things. So we'll just leave that alone. Okay, so right now I see 13 people in Nearpod and I see 21 people in the session. So that means about 8 of you should try to get into that session, into the slides if you can. Okay, so basics of teaching and learning, cognition and motivation. Let's move it. Let's jump into things. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Larry Davies. I have a doctorate in educational leadership. My other background is I started teaching way back in 1986, maybe before some of you were born, I don't know. And I have been teaching about 30 years, obviously. I've also been a teacher trainer for maybe 15 some odd years. And right now I live and work in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. I work for a rather large college here, and my job is to teach teachers to be teachers. So I'm kind of what you might call a teacher trainer. My official title is Senior Specialist Instruction. But basically that means I work with teachers to improve their teaching. Since COVID came out, I decided it would be nice to help other teachers share some of the things I do with my teachers at the college I work at. And so here you are at one of my sessions today, and this session is brought to you by Teak Learning, LLC. This is my private consulting company. We do a lot of other things. Also in my title is SFHEA. I want to mention that means I'm a senior fellow for the Higher Education Academy. The Higher Education Academy is a British organization that works mainly in higher education, well, actually only in higher education, and it accredits teachers who can show evidence that they know how to teach. And that includes planning, teaching, what kind of feedback and assessment they do, how they work on their learning environment, and what kind of continuing professional development do they do. A senior fellow means I am certified that I have shown evidence of how I work with groups of teachers. So I've been doing this for, again, like I say, teaching teachers online for about 15 years now. Okay, so one more time, just want to remind people, because I see 13 of you are looking at the interactive slides, but I have 22. That means about 9 people are not yet in the slides. So if you can, look in your chat, and you'll see I have a link that goes directly to these slides, or you can open up a browser tab, type in nearpod.com, and then enter the code to join the session at VZJFC, and that'll get us going. Also, during the recording, I anticipate another group of people, as many as 10 or 20 more might join in. I had a lot of people sign up for today's session, and this is already a pretty good turnout. So I may be pasting this link in a few times and repeating myself. So I apologize in advance for the repetition, but I want to make sure everybody gets into the slides. So again, I've just had 1 or 2 people join as I was saying that. So you want to open your chat and take a look at logging into the slides. Okay, so let's move into things. I want to find out where you are in the world. And actually, I have a little, oh yeah, right. I want to find out where you are in the world. So if you can, in the chat, can you just let me know where you are? Again, I am in Abu Dhabi, UAE. But I do want to find out where all of you are from. So if you can type that into the chat. Okay, Divya is from Qatar. We have Nepal. Loma, you're coming in from iPad. Okay, I'm really interested to see how this works with that. Sharjah in the UAE. That means you're just east of me, as I'm in Abu Dhabi. And Al Ruwais, wow, you're way out near the Saudi border. The farthest west I've been here is Khalifa City. I can't remember the name of that place. That's near Ruwais. I went there one time. Saudi, yes, good. We have people from Muscat in Oman. That's a nice 5-hour drive from where I'm at. And Doha in Qatar. All right. So a lot of you are here right in this Middle Eastern region. Someone from the UK is good. And I do get people from Nepal. That's good. And I think, Amr, I've seen you before. Oh, great. Amr from Algeria. I think maybe you're about 2 hours west of me in time zone. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'd like to hear more from you, Amr. I haven't really worked with people from Algeria before, but that would be nice. Okay. And Victorina, you're right here with me in Abu Dhabi. Okay. All right. So we have several people from the UAE also and from nearby regions. Okay. So my next question is a poll. And Shabnam, thank you. Excuse me. And you have just 45 seconds to answer this poll. And the question is to assess yourself as an online teacher. I'm assuming most of you are teachers, but I'd like to see your experience as an online teacher. So your choices here about online teaching is I'm a novice, just starting to learn, don't really understand it. I'm an apprentice, starting to get it, need someone to coach. I'm a practitioner, mostly do it by myself, but sometimes I make mistakes or get stuck. And I'm an expert, and I'm going to click D because I'm an expert. And I just have to move my chat out of the way. Then I'm going to click this big blue submit button, and that will push out the answer. And I'm going to share this with you in about 10 seconds. As soon as you answer the poll, just 5 more seconds. Okay, and finished. Let me just wait another 2 to 3 seconds to see how we're doing. All right, so here are the responses. Of course, I chose D, that I'm an expert. Maybe I'm the only one, and I have one person who's a practitioner and one person who's a novice, and all the rest of you put yourself as an apprentice, meaning you're kind of at the beginning, but you're hoping to do a lot more. And I'm guessing you chose apprentice because maybe before COVID you never taught online, and now you're teaching online for the first time. So most of what I'm going to talk about today is the basics of teaching and learning, but I will try every once in a while to let you know how that applies to online. And a couple of you typed in VZJFC as your username, but that's anyway, okay, let's just go forward. All right, so basically teaching and learning, there are 4 main things I'm going to talk about, but I'm splitting these out into 2 sessions. I talk about cognition, motivation, emotional intelligence, and assessment. However, today I'm only going to talk about cognition and motivation, and I'm leaving emotional intelligence and assessment for part 2, which will come in about 2 weeks. And each of these sections has a main question that I'm trying to address. For cognition, it's how do learners learn best, and we'll talk about that today. What motivates learners? That's obviously motivation. What role does emotional intelligence play in learning? That's going to come 2 weeks from now. and how do we best measure learner progress will also come in about 2 weeks from now. Okay, and I'm going to stop just for a second because I see about 3 new people have joined. So new people, if you can open up the chat, the Zoom chat, hopefully you know where that is. That's the more choice on your Zoom menu, all the way, it should be all the way on the right. If you click on that, you'll see chat. Choose chat, that will open up this window and you'll see the link to these slides and you'll be able to interact a little bit more. I do have about maybe 5 or 6 interactions that I'm going to do with you today. And I'm going to split you into small groups where you'll be able to open up your microphone and talk with each other. So my sessions are very highly participatory. It's not just me talking the whole time. I do want you to participate because you are all teachers and you have a lot to contribute to the session. So I'll say a little bit, but then I'll ask you some questions and I'll put you into some groups so you can talk to each other. Then we'll come back and kind of summarize things here and there. So let's start out with cognition and how do learners learn best. This is a good starting point. So here's our first interaction, because I would like you to tell me how you might answer this question. So by yourself right now, I'd like you to answer this question. How do learners learn best? So the way to use this tool is you can, if you look at the screen I'm sharing, if you come down to the bottom here, and where you can see it says share thoughts and images here, I've put my mouse here and I've clicked my computer and you can see the cursor is flashing. So now I can type my answer. Learners learn best by, let's say, repetition. Okay, so I type that in and then I come over here to post and I'll click post. And as you can see, somebody already posted before me. And then my posting comes right up. So go ahead and fill in that box. You can answer more than one time. But answer as much as you can. So again, how do learners learn best? And again, for those who want to participate, right now 15 of you are signed up, but I see 24 people here, so that's 9 people who do not have access to these slides yet. So if you can, again, open up your chat and you can join in this participation by clicking on this link that I have here in the chat. Or you can go to nearpod.com and enter this code VZJFC. And again, if you have more than one idea, please do type it in and enter. You're not limited to one response. You can have as many responses as you like. Okay. Okay, well, if you can, it should, I'm surprised it isn't, but you can just type in the chat and then I'll copy and paste for you into this activity. Yeah, for those of you who aren't able to do that, if you have an iPad, I would just say quit the app and log in again, see if that's going to work. And if you're not able to access, just type your answer into the chat here and I will copy and paste it for you. That's fine. Okay, so a lot of people already have made some responses. So what I'd like you to do next is read other people's responses. So I'm going to do that on my screen right now. And I'm looking through things, and I saw one that I really liked, which is this one. This person said through their different multiple intelligence. So I like this one a lot. So I'm going to click on this heart in the lower right corner. And when I click on it, it turns a different color, and the number 1 comes, showing that one person, mainly me, clicked on that one to show that they liked it. So what I'd like you to do is read through all of these things that people have posted and choose 3 or 4 that you really like. Don't click on all of them. Well, if you want to click on all of them, great. But I would say click on 3 or 4 that you think are uh, a good a good idea on how learners learn best. Okay, so I'm also going to click on this one. That's already getting a lot of votes. And this one. And this one. This one. Okay, I clicked on about 5 or 6. Keep clicking, keep clicking. About 1 more minute for clicking. Okay, now I'm going to wave a magic wand and rearrange all of these answers. And the most popular ones are going to come up to the top. Bing, the most popular ones are at the top. Okay, so I'm just going to now read these ones up near the top left corner. This one got 9 votes, and it says cooperation and collaboration with peers and teacher. Can anybody explain why they chose this one? You can open up your mic and explain, or you can type in the chat, either way. Remember, these are highly interactive sessions, so long periods of silence means less than highly interactive. I can assume you're typing an answer.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, go ahead.
I believe that cooperation and collaboration are very important because these two processes make sure that students are engaged and responsible of their learning. Like the student is the leader of the learning process by working with peers, by working with teacher. They are not passive. They are not receiving the learning content by just listening to the teacher.
Okay, so student-led learning is very important in cooperation and collaboration. Can you or anybody else talk about the difference between cooperation and collaboration? Does anyone want to give a go? I'm just copy pasting here.
Well, collaboration means that students work together in order to, for example, answer a question, or they collaborate to produce a project or to do a homework or assignment. So each one is responsible of doing something in order to get the final work done.
Okay, and I want to add to that, each one is responsible for doing a part. That's usually cooperation, but each one who picks their best skill and do that, and they put their best skills together and create something better than they could create by themselves individually. These complementary skills are what constitute collaborative learning. So I think that's an important distinction between the two. So when you're teaching, try to find out what your students do best, and then move on with that. Okay, so thank
Yes,
you.
maybe this to help also with differentiation strategies, like students with different levels and background can be all engaged.
Yes, so collaborative learning definitely lends itself to students who have different levels, either of cognitive ability or linguistic. Their language ability might be different. As you know, for many of you who are in the Middle East, the language of instruction tends to be English in higher education, whereas most of your students start with an Arabic mother tongue or Arabic as a second language, but now they're supposed to use English at the higher education level, and that can be more of a challenge. Yes. Okay. So thanks for all of your responses here. And I hope you have some good ideas here. If you want to go back to this board as a reference, just drop me an email and I will send this link out to everybody so people can go back, because what you just created here just now is basically forever on the internet at a unique URL, and I'll be happy to share that later on. Okay, so from all of your answers, I want to talk about a few of these things today, including the growth mindset, prior knowledge, context, practice, which many of you mentioned, feedback, self-regulation, which is a kind of feedback, and creativity. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. The first one is called the growth mindset. And the growth mindset, the idea is, sorry, let me just go back one slide because my screen didn't get that so much. So again, we're going to look at growth mindset, prior knowledge, context, practice, feedback, self-regulation, and creativity. So we're going to dive down into these. And all of these are exploring the cognition side of learning. So the idea of the growth mindset is how we respond to 5 things. How we respond to the idea of where do skills come from, how we react to challenges, the type of effort we need to be successful, what feedback means to us, and what we do when setbacks come. So in the growth mindset, when we think about skills, we think that skills can always be improved. There's always a place for any learner at any time to be better than they already have. And it takes, again, some practice and some work, but your skill can improve. When you're faced with challenges, challenges are things you should embrace, you should go after, you should be happy to be challenged because they help you to progress and move forward. Effort is looked at as something that is essential to growth and essential to learning. And even as a teacher, you're teaching, you need to put in some effort in your planning in order to get your students to appreciate the value of effort in learning that they have to put in. It's not just, they're not just going to look at a thing one time and boom, it's in their head and they know what to do with the things that they're learning. When you get feedback, you realize that this feedback is something that you can learn from. And I'll talk about a different mindset in just a second. But learning is there to help you to improve. And so you take it as it is, and you should not take it, I'll talk about this in the next one. So feedback is valuable, and it's something you can learn from. And if you're working on a project of any kind or working on something and you have a setback of some kind, this is more of a wake-up call that you need to look and see how you're working and what you're doing, and maybe make some adjustments before you can move forward again. But it does not mean, a setback does not mean failure and the end of something. It's just a call to say, hey, what's happening? It's a call for reflection and to motivate yourself again to learn and to continue learning. Now, the opposite of, does anyone know the term for the opposite of a growth mindset? Because that's what I'm going to talk about next. Do you know the opposite of this? There we go. Lukman has it. So now we're going to talk about this thing called the fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset approach to these 5 things is quite different. Most people with a fixed mindset think that skills are something you're born with and not something you can learn or improve. So this is quite the opposite. People with a fixed mindset, if they come up with if there's any kind of challenge that they face, they will give up very easily. They won't put in a lot of effort because the mindset says you really don't need effort, because if you're already smart and intelligent and you can do things, there's no effort involved. You'll always do things in a successful way. And if the challenge is too high, then give up. That's the best thing to do. And the fixed mindset also looks at feedback as a personal thing. When you tell me some way to improve, you're criticizing me, the person. You're not criticizing my behavior or my knowledge or my skill or my competence. It's a personal attack on me. And lastly, if there are any setbacks that happen, again, during a project or anything else like that, the tendency for people with the fixed mindset is to look around to see who to blame. This didn't work. It's not my fault. It must be their fault, or it's their fault, or it's your fault, but it's definitely not my fault because I'm naturally talented and I learn things very quickly, and I don't need any effort to do anything. So if something goes wrong, obviously I've done my part. Somebody else didn't do their part. And a fixed mindset can really impede learning more than anything. So obviously, as a teacher, you want to try to nurture the growth mindset and let your students know that they can learn anything they want. It does take some effort and to respond to the challenges, be open to feedback, etc. So this set of questions, I would say, is a good set that you can use for yourself as a teacher, or if you're working with your students and you might ask them some of these questions. So if you ever feel stuck, then you might ask yourself, have you ever made a list of things which you still need to find out in order to complete the task? This could be for you, the teacher. This could be for the learners too. Have you made bullet points about the things you do know? Sometimes students will say, well, I don't know that, I can't do that, I don't know. Well, okay, maybe you don't know all of it, but you probably know some of it. So what do you know about this particular topic? Or have you talked through the task with someone else in the class? Sometimes students will give up if they can't get somewhere, and they never seek help from their peers or even from the teacher. They just give up. Oh, I can't do this, that's all. So you'll encourage them to work with each other and again to collaborate or cooperate with each other in order to solve a problem or a challenge. Have you had another look on the internet? The internet is a good search tool for most things. If you're working with students, you can always push them to do that more than one time. Have you read the information again? Have you used your notes from previous lessons? Have you asked someone else in class? These are all ways to go back and review and work with others and work with any notes or other things that you've done. Have you done extra learning in your own time? Part of your responsibility as an educator is to get your students to love to learn how to learn on their own without you giving them work all the time, but they getting their own motivation to learn. And we will, I'll talk about motivation I think in the next part or in this part. And have you highlighted the parts of the task that you can do? So instead of saying, I can't do this, you have them relook over the task and say, well, which parts can you do? Maybe we can start with those. And finally, maybe the most important thing is, have you said, I can't do this yet? And the word yet really is the basis of the whole idea of the growth mindset, that every learner has the potential, and depending on their environment, they haven't learned something yet, but with some effort and some positivity, they can get there. So this is the basis of the growth mindset. For more on this, you are welcome to click this web page. I hook this up, and this will bring you to a talk on TED.com given by Carol Dweck. Dr. Carol Dweck is basically the first researcher to write about this phenomenon of the growth mindset and to talk and to show her research in this, that it has had a positive impact in schools, especially if it's done at the administrative level and all teachers are on board and work for these kind of things. So you'll want to do that on your own. Obviously, we can't do this right now because that's about a 10-minute talk. And so this is just here for you to check out. And again, I have her here on my screen, and you'll see how the TED Talk works. So if you open this up.
The power of yet. I heard about a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number.
Okay, so this is about a 6-year-old video, and a lot of her research was in the city of Chicago. And she went there and she did research and found out that yet is the key to improving student learning. So again, you can watch this as a starting point. I think it's a good starting point for exploring the growth mindset a little bit more. Now, there's one other thing that you should be aware of, and that is this web page. I think it's good to look at this one too. And again, I have this. Where do I have this? This. That's not it. Sorry. Okay, I don't have it here. Let me go back. So if I click this web page, sorry, it opens in a new window. Recently, while I was preparing for growth mindset, I also came across some academics who said growth mindset is probably not a good, the research done is probably not so valid, that there are a lot of other factors, including context, to take into consideration. And so I want you, when you, if you're exploring growth mindset some more, be a little bit more skeptical. I actually am doing a whole presentation around growth mindset, but I want to do a little more research now because I'm seeing that it could be an extremely biased study and based on this thing called deficit thinking. So I'm intrigued by the idea of growth mindset, but there are some pretty strong critics of this whole idea and approach. So you do probably want to check that out. And I did put this in here just at the last minute. Okay, the next thing is to be able to activate your students' prior knowledge. This is a very important strategy for teaching and learning. You want to find out, this is a little bit related to growth mindset because you want to find out what learners already know, because what they know affects their learning. And it also helps you when you think about collaboration and cooperation and pairing students who know more about a topic, and students who know less about a topic. One particular strategy I use all the time with my teachers is this graphic organizer called the KWL. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. If you are, type yes. If you aren't, type no. The KWL, very quickly, is the K and the W are kind of the way where you activate knowledge, where you ask people what they know about a topic, and you ask them what they want to know. Then you do your lessons, you do your learning with them, you work through things, and then at the end of class, or at the end of a project, or at the end of a learning cycle, you ask them what they learned. So this particular graphic organizer you can use in 2 parts. The part to activate knowledge is the K and the W. The L is to review what they learned. And again, this is a scalable graphic organizer that you can use. You can either use it for one activity or a lesson or a unit about something, or it can be a theme or a project, or it can be for the entire term that you're working with it. I would say use this often with your students because it really helps you to see what they already know about some particular topic. This can help you to, again, pair them up to see who knows what and get the people who have more knowledge to work with the people who have less knowledge about that particular topic. The W is more of a creative and critical thinking part. What do I want to know? You really want to encourage your students to be curious and to formulate good questions about something, some kind of a topic. And then what have I learned is, again, this is the reflective part that comes later on. I would even, I don't talk about this in my assessment piece for teaching and learning, but the L belongs in the assessment piece. And it's a self-assessment thing where your students tell you what they have learned about that topic and they write it down in any particular way. So for me, this is one of many, many, many ways you can activate their prior knowledge. But I think this is probably, off the top of my head, one of the best ways to get them going with that. Okay, and then there's context. All learning is usually based on context of some kind. And what this means is you want to generalize your learning to new contexts, but you need to facilitate that context. And so I'm going to give you an example of what this means right now. So my first question is, can any of you speak, read, or write Japanese? And this is a yes/no question. Can you speak, read, or write Japanese?
No.
Thank you, Tasha.
Sure, no.
All right. Good, perfect. All right, everybody's saying no. Good, then things are gonna work out very well. Okay, here we go. Here's some Japanese. I lived in Japan 13 years. My wife is Japanese. I speak upper intermediate Japanese. I do not have working proficiency in Japanese, but I can read it pretty well. So this is Japanese katakana. Japanese has 3 alphabets, 3 different alphabets, yes. Can anybody read this?
No.
No.
So you should say no because you have no context whatsoever to be able to read this, right? I mean, if I put this in front of you, if you did this in, most of you, I'm assuming, are Arabic native speakers. If you did the same to me and you put some Arabic in front of me and said, what does this say? I would have the same response. No, I have no idea. I've never studied it, nothing. We need some context. So, okay, let me help you to read this. Oh, sorry, I want to go back. Wait, I'm going to go back. Is there anything you notice? These are 6 characters in Japanese. Is there anything that you notice?
No.
Look carefully at the 6 letters.
Some of the characters look the same.
Correct. Which 2 characters are the same? Which ones?
The first on the far right.
Yes?
And the third from the left.
Good. Okay. So one thing I should tell you is that Japanese is read from left to right. I know most Arabic is right to left, but Japanese is actually read in a bunch of directions, but we're going to read this left to right. So character number 3 and character number 5 are both pronounced do. Okay? And I put the sounds of each of these under the letters, and let me just read the sounds so you can hear the sounds. Ma, ku, do, na. Now comes the most difficult. Ru, 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 and then do again. So can you read this? Anyone?
Ma, ku, do, na, ru, do.
That sounds beautiful. What does this mean? Any idea?
No.
You should probably say, no, I have no idea, because I still haven't given you enough context, right? You still don't have the context. You have some letters, you have some sounds. Now let me try to give you some context here. Maybe this will help.
Ah.
Can you read
It's
that?
a McDonald's.
Okay,
McDonald's.
Nice.
Can you read the word again?
McDonald. Okay, McDonald.
Do you remember the 6 letters and the sounds?
Yeah, Makudo. Mm.
Okay.
Do, do.
Now you have some context, right? Now
Yes, yes.
suddenly you're putting together that this says Makudonadu do.
Yes, McDonald.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
So how about this one? What does this say?
Oh my God. It's a good.
Oh.
Okay, so now you know how to read the first one.
Do what is very much familiar. Can make out.
Here's a little help. The first letter is pronounced ha, and then the next one is
Oh.
and the next one is ba. And then when you see that line, it means you continue with the vowel. So it's not ba, it's ba. And then the next one is not ga, it's ga. So ha, ba, ga. There we go. Lukman has it. Hamburger.
McDonald's.
Makudonaru do hamburger. So with a little bit of context now, you can read that sign and it says Makudonaru do hamburger, right? And then when you walk into the restaurant, you can get a nice McDonald's hamburger. If, like me, you like to eat junk food, and I'm too old to be eating McDonald's, but I love it. You know, again, I'm from the US, and I grew up on McDonald's hamburgers, unfortunately, and I like to eat them. So my whole point of this is you can't teach without supplying some kind of context. And once you've supplied context, this helps make learning much easier. If you just throw some letters on a screen without any kind of context, you can't expect any learning to happen. You have to support that learning in some way. You have to come up with many different ways of putting things into context. And then you're going to have a little more success with your learning. Okay, I need to just take another drink. My mouth is getting dry. I have some weak tea here. Okay. So now let's watch a commercial. I just want you to see this McDonald's hamburger commercial from Japan. Ready? It's just 30 seconds. 'Okay, so I hope you heard them saying Makudonadu do 2 times, right? So now you have some context. You're able to at least hear that word, and they didn't say hamburger in there, but there was that guy called the hamburguda, the hamburger. This is a very old commercial, as you can see, 1977, probably before many of you were born. Okay, anyway, we can move on. Okay, so context is very important. The next thing, of course, is practice. You can acquire your long-term knowledge, skill, competence, and abilities by practicing, lots and lots of practice. I really don't have anything to say beyond, we all know that practice means a lot of repetition and it's necessary. And just as an example, the way I learned to read Japanese, I lived in Japan at the time, and all of the license plates would have one letter on it. So I used the license plates in Japan to learn to read some of the letters in Japan. And that was pretty easy because I was out in traffic a lot. So I had a lot of different cars, and that, instead of wasting time doing nothing, I would be driving, go, oh, okay, ma, oh, cool, no, da, and I would see that on cars. So getting your students to practice is absolutely key. There are many different ways to do that. If you want to click here, again, I went into TED Talks and I looked up a way to practice, and I found this 4-minute video on how to practice effectively just about anything. They talk about repetition, but they do talk about a lot of other things. So you might want to click that. That will open in another browser. And again, you can do that on your own. I'm not going to use this today. I just wanted to find some extra resources for you. Okay, and then we have feedback. Another way that people learn best is by getting feedback, and clear, detailed, and timely feedback to learners fully supports learning. There's a lot of literature on this all over the place, excuse me again. And the practice of feedback, I think it's easy to talk about feedback, but it's a little more difficult to practice to learn the best way to do feedback. And I'm not going to talk about that in this session. This session really is just the basics. So we're just looking and talking about various factors in teaching and learning. But you do want to think about feedback and using feedback and how feedback can be effective. However, I do have a little poll that I'm going to do just now. Let me just double check. Okay, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a series of statements, and or actually maybe it's just 2 statements, I can't remember. And I would like you to decide which statement is the best feedback statement. Okay, and let's just go to this slide now. Sorry, I'm wrestling with my technology here. All right, so you're going to have about, oh, okay. So what I'm going to show you is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different statements about feedback. And I would like you to read these statements. And I would like you to select only one statement that really stands out for you. That is, you're probably going to agree with me that all these statements about feedback are good and they're absolutely right. But I'm going to force you to pick one that really is the one you want to mostly adopt from this point on when you're thinking about doing feedback. Or you can adopt all 7, that's fine, but I do want you to make a choice. And again, you're gonna have about 3 minutes and 45 seconds. If you cannot see, it's coming up, hang on. If you cannot see the buttons, if you're not able to interact here, just type in your answer, A, B, C, D, E, F, or G, into the chat so that we have an idea, okay? So I'm going to start this now. And again, this is, you have about 3 minutes and 45 seconds to read through all of these statements and choose the one that you think is closest to how you feel about feedback. Okay, take your time.
Is it possible to select more than one answer or no?
No, it is not, no. I'm just waiting for 5 more people. Or 20 seconds. 20 seconds left, then we'll talk about this. All right. My voice is in and we're continuing. Okay, so it looks like there are 2 that didn't get any votes. That's fine. Let's start with the one that got the most votes. If learners know the classroom is a safe place to make mistakes, they're more likely to use feedback for learning. Can someone who chose that tell us why you chose that, please?
I chose it because that's the reason why the learners go to schools, for them to learn. So if they're not comfortable of making mistake and knowing that their mistake is okay, it's for them to learn, they won't be able, if you give them feedback because they make something wrong and punish them for making something wrong, so they'll never learn. So they're in school so that they can be able to learn. So in the learning process, they make mistakes.
Right. I think a lot of schools around the world tend to approach mistakes as something that needs to be punished, as you said. And then if there's punishment involved, why take a chance at getting the wrong answer and getting punished? So punishment for mistakes is kind of the opposite of what you want to do. You want to encourage mistakes as much as possible and learn from those mistakes. One reason I think this is really important in jobs like the medical profession or aviation, these are 2 important jobs where people's lives are actually on the line. You don't want people making mistakes in the real task that they're doing. You want them to make the mistake before they actually do it and learn from that mistake so that they don't do that. That's why we don't have many plane crashes, and that's why we don't have a lot of people in hospitals who get maltreated in some way, or we have less than we should, I think. Okay, for the next one, learners need to know their learning target, the skill they're supposed to learn, or else feedback is just someone telling them what to do. Can someone tell me why you chose this one? Somebody want to jump in, please? Okay, so for this one, I'm actually not going to comment on it. There is a video that I'm about to show you very shortly that actually talks about this. How about this one? The feedback learners give teachers can be more powerful than the feedback teachers give learners. Can I get someone to comment on that? And Lukman and Alicia, I will read what you wrote in just a minute. Can anyone want to comment on that? Feedback learners give teachers? Okay, so my quick comment on this one is that don't forget your job is to give feedback to your learners, but you also want to find out how effective you are as a teacher, and sometimes, many times, you need to get that feedback from them formally or informally, but you need to get it from them. And as Lukman has said, both learners and teachers benefit from each other. Remember that, because if you're giving it, the feedback you give very much depends on the feedback that you get from your students, how they're responding to your lesson. So when I hear very long silence, I try to leave time for silence, but then that tells me that people either don't want to answer or are too shy, and so I have to pop in and try and do what I can. Excuse me. For the person who chose feedback is not advice, praise, or evaluation. It's information about how we're doing in our efforts to reach a goal. Do you want to comment on that?
I would like to comment by saying that actually all of the statements are somehow interrelated to each other, but the first one, or the one was selected by most, maybe cover all the points or all the details of others. The most important thing from all that, students are involved or interested in receiving the feedback or considering the feedback as something part of the learning process. So they are taking the feedback in order to complete what they have already started. So I think that we can learn something from each statement. All of them are correct and all of them are useful to consider, but the first one covers all.
Okay, that's fine. I would even say that this one is my favorite, and again, there's a video that's coming up that kind of talks about that. And the last one, I'll just say that one person chose effective feedback occurs during the learning while there is still time to act on it. And I would say this is, of course, they're all very important. This one just helps to remind you that timeliness is important.
I chose effective feedback occurs during the learning because it's a way of assessing students during the lesson process. So effective feedback, we don't always want to wait till the end of the lesson. Sometimes we can stop students and ask them questions and see what they're thinking about and encourage them maybe to broaden their perspective.
Okay, right. I would label this informal, as Lukman just said, informal feedback, but we also will call this formative feedback. So formative feedback while they are learning, and summative feedback usually comes at the end of a learning cycle or learning period. And formative is kind of similar to ongoing feedback too, Lukman. So yes, I agree that you do need to try to create opportunities where you can assess students and then give them formative feedback in smaller groups. And there are a lot of different strategies and ways to do that, although we can't really go over all that today just because of the time that's limited. Lukman, I just want to read what people wrote in the chat. Lukman says, the learning environment is crucial for students to learn. We all make mistakes, and it is through mistakes that we learn. Oh, okay, so this again addresses the first one about it being a safe place to learn. Alicia says, learners will be able to self-assess their own work and able to reflect from those mistakes, which help them develop reflective thinking skills. I think I'm going to talk about this very shortly, about students self-regulating. Yeah, this one is coming up too. So I'll talk about that a little bit more, and it does occur in a video that I'm going to show you. And then Lukman again says, however, if students are informed that it's okay to make mistakes, we can learn from them, learning will take place. Okay, so we have talked about this a little bit. All right, great. That's a bunch of statements about feedback. And again, for me, this one is maybe the most important, that they need to know their learning target, or else feedback is just someone telling them what to do. So one of your main jobs is to remind students of their learning targets, the purpose of the lesson, the purpose of the unit, the purpose of the chapter, the purpose of the project, the purpose of the class. All of these are things where learning outcomes come into play, and the outcomes are the target at the end, and you have to constantly remind them. Otherwise, when you're doing things with them, in their mind, they're always thinking, why am I doing this? What does this have to do with me? When is this ever going to be useful in my life? Etc. And if they have that kind of attitude, you're going to have the wall coming up for learning, and your job as a teacher is to get them to see why they're doing it. So you always have to have these targets in mind and keep that in front of them as much as possible. So here is this video I want to show you very quickly that kind of reinforces all of these, and and I'm going to show this to you. This is called The Power of Feedback. I like this video. I found it on YouTube. It's about 3 minutes long. It looks like it's a student project. but I think they did a great job of talking about 4 different levels of feedback and how they are effective or ineffective. And again, everything that I'm sharing with you today, if you write to me and say, can you send me the URL for that video, I'm happy to send it to you so you can review it again. I just want to watch this just to watch, and you'll see that what we've already talked about is some of the things that they cover, but now she gives names to these different levels of feedback. So have a look, if I can find it. That's not it. That's the one on practice. Okay, here we go. So this is called The Power of Feedback.
The Power of Feedback by John Hattie and Helen Timperley. While constructive feedback can be one of the most effective methods to enable learning, when done incorrectly, it can do more harm than help. That's why John Hattie and Helen Timperley studied what types of feedback and conditions allow learning to flourish, and what cases stifle growth. To begin with, Hattie and Timperley define feedback as information provided by an agent, such as a teacher, peer, book, etc., regarding aspects of one's performance or understanding. According to the study, feedback is intended to help a student get from where they are to where they need to be. The article, The Power of Feedback, describes many ways this can be done. The students have 2 options. Either they try harder and exercise more effective methods, or they lower their goal. Ideally, teachers will attempt to give constructive reviews so that the student will implement the first strategy instead of its alternative. What teachers can do to aid the students is provide reasonable goals as well as help students reach them through constructive feedback. But what is constructive feedback? Hattie and Timperley define it as a response that answers these 3 questions. Where am I going, which defines the goal? How am I going, which describes what the student is currently doing? And where to next, which guides the student to the next step toward attaining their goal.
Oh, I just wanted to stop right there and just reiterate those 3 questions as a teacher. Remember, when a student says, what's our purpose for doing this? All you need to do is remind them of the goal. Where are you going? And then part 2 is, where are you now? Where are you in relation to that learning outcome now? And then what do you need to do now in order to get to that goal? And for me, this is the 3 questions that really push feedback to where it needs to be. With that said,
ideally, these 3 questions are woven together to enhance the student's understanding of what needs to be done. According to the article, there are 4 different levels of feedback that may reflect these questions: the task level, process level, self-regulation level, and the self level. The task level involves feedback regarding how well the student has performed the task. It's the most common type of feedback, as the article claims that about 90% of questions posed by the teachers are aimed at this level. While it can be effective while addressing interpretations, it's rarely efficient, and it doesn't generalize what the student needs to improve. It simply defines what exactly needs to be corrected for a specific project. The process level leads students to consider how they obtain information and how their task is connected to relating tasks. It challenges the students to form a deeper understanding of learning and encourages them to construct meaning on their own, which proves more effective. This promotes error detection, which is when a student reflects on their own work. The next level is the self-regulation level, which addresses the way the students examine and adjust their action toward their learning goal. Like the process level, this encourages the student to self-assess, but to an even more critical degree, which is why it is also considered effective. However, students that are not confident in their own abilities or who are not as effective of learners will not benefit from this type of feedback. The 4th and final level is the self level. Also used too often in classrooms, this type of feedback involves reflection on the person and not their work. It typically builds a student up, but gives them little direction toward improvement. The article suggests that this type of feedback is, in fact, counterproductive and interferes with the student's ability to self-assess. That is why, instead of complimenting students, teachers are encouraged to compliment either the student's work or the way in which he or she has done it. However, each student responds differently to each form of feedback, and while certain types are generally more effective than others, it is important to designate which form must always be used. Ultimately, the teacher must be familiar with what enables each student to grow individually in order to enhance the learning process for every being in their classroom.
okay. I like that the woman who did this, she talks very quickly and everything's done quickly. And I know that because of the nature of this particular webinar, Basics of, we can't really dig down a little deeper, but all I want to say is that the 2 things that I get for this is that the process level of feedback, talking about what needs to be done, is one of the more effective ways that's going to be effective for a majority of your learners. And of course, the self-regulation level, where you get students to start to work on self-reflection and maybe a little bit of peer critiquing. So self and peer reflection and self and peer feedback are things that you want to work with your students. Now, again, as I said at the beginning, I work with college age, I work in higher education. Some of you are probably primary, middle school, and high school teachers. I would think that having students learn to reflect is something that maybe starts in middle school and you can do in high school, but I don't know if I do it with little kids or how. I can't really recommend anything for primary education and what are effective ways to give feedback to kids. So with that said.
Excuse me.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. When we give feedback in KG or in elementary, sometimes for elementary, we do 2 stars and 1 wish. So we have to, we are mandated to give feedback. And usually how I give feedback for KG is through pictures, maybe a happy face, and then I'll write a positive comment, and I have to stick it on their work.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I am familiar with 2 stars, 1 wish, and that is, again, it's a kind of a graphic organizer feedback mechanism that teachers give to students, but maybe I think you can use that with students doing the same thing for other students at the primary level. Is that something that can be done, or is it just from teacher to student?
What do you mean from teacher to student? I'm sorry.
So the 2 stars, 1 wish is you're asking the students to star 2 things that they learned and 1 wish. That's something that the students do?
Well, usually it's the way teachers can give feedback. It's one of the examples of how we give feedback. Okay. But we do have to give feedback. It may not just simply be that method, but we do have to give them feedback. We can't just put a grade or a star on their work.
All right. So I'm not as familiar with how that's done in primary schools. I would guess that there's a little bit of a lot of praise that's involved, and then showcasing their work and commenting on their work. So the other thing that was, so thank you very much for that. So the other thing that was mentioned in the video was this idea of self-regulation. Learners need to be self-reflective to regulate their own learning. And these skills can be taught and they can be learned. And this usually increases achievement and their well-being. Alicia says that constructive, specific, and thoughtful feedback is really helpful. So I'm not going any more deeply into feedback today, I don't think, in my content, I can't remember. But yes, there are ways to approach feedback. And what I did like about this video, the one other point they made about, I think it was called the self feedback, where you say, Johnny did a good job, as opposed to Johnny's essay showed strength in A, B, C, and D. So you're not praising the person, but you're praising their work. And we tend to praise the person more than the work, especially probably in primary, middle school, and high schools. And I'm hoping that if you are supposed to give feedback to primary school students, that it's more complimentary of the work they're doing than the person themselves. So there is that balance, and it takes some time to learn how to do it in the right way, but you can get there. And Kaitan, I will, at the end, I'll mention your question. And self-assessment, Shabnan says self-assessment works equally, and I will agree with this, although, again, it has to be taught and it takes some practice. But once you do this regularly with students, they'll know what to do and they'll start thinking about how they're learning in the best possible ways too. And if you have students say in self-regulation, again, these 3 questions that were in the video that we talk about. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure that this is coming up. There we go. Sorry, I was sharing the wrong tab. And again, the 3 questions in the video put in the way of self-regulation. You might just have students say, what's my learning goal for today, for this unit, for this chapter, for this project? Where am I right now in relation to that goal, and what do I need to do in order to reach that goal? I really think these are three very important questions that really give context to learning and push students forward and get them to be intrinsically motivated also, which I think I'm going to talk about very shortly. And the last piece for this part, for cognition, of course, is creativity. And the only thing I really want to say about this is learner creativity can be fostered. Children are generally very creative. We need to try to preserve that as much as possible and as long as possible. The only resource I want to point to you here is another TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson. If you're not familiar with it, you should be able to open this here. He gives a talk on TED called Do Schools Kill Creativity? And I think his main answer is yes, they do. And I think this is probably one of the most important videos to watch. It's a little bit old, but it does have 65 million views so far on TED, which is one of the most watched videos on TED.com. Even though it is from 2006, a lot of the points he makes about creativity are still valid today. And teachers, I would definitely advise you to watch this video, think about what he says, think about what you do that kills creativity in your students, think about what you do that encourages creativity, and do more of encouraging and less of killing. Now, I'm not saying you are that you kill creativity. Maybe you've already watched this video and you know it's important, and you have a lot of activities you do that encourage creativity. And I will still say it's important to watch this video, let your fellow teachers know about it, and have some discussions about it, because it is an extremely important part of learning, all from beginning all the way up through higher education, even all the way up through the world of education. All formal education really needs a good injection of creativity more. So again, I don't have specific examples of this right now. What I tend to use is, I think off the top of my head, mind mapping is probably one of the big things I do. That's a creative type of exercise. And I actually do have, I will be doing a presentation on mind mapping, I think in about 2 weeks. So we'll talk about that too. Also now I've noticed that we do have about 5 or 6 more people who have joined us since we started. And in the chat here in Zoom, I have pasted a link, and I'll just do that one more time. I pasted a link into these Nearpod interactive slides. So if you want to click on that link, you can type in your name and click join, and then you should be able to join in the interactions that we have. Okay, so we finished talking about everything to do with cognition, and what I want to do now is take about, wow, I started at 2:30. Okay, I'm going to skip this because there just isn't time, because there's too much talking. I'm trying to reduce the content down as little as possible. I do want you to think just for yourself right now. I was going to have you do this in a small group, but I'm going to skip the small group because of time. So think of everything we've talked about so far. I believe we talked about the growth mindset. What else did we talk about so far? Growth mindset, creativity, fixed mindset. Okay, so I want you to think of all the things that we've talked about in the first hour, and actually it's close to an hour and a half now, and tell me what your big takeaway is. What's the most important takeaway you can think of from everything that we talked about cognition? And again, it can just be a word or two. It can be a full sentence, but let's think about what's important here. Just want to take about 1 more minute for this. I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure we end at in about 50 minutes from now, 40 minutes from now. So this particular activity I'm having you do right now, I would call this a type of self-regulation, reflection type activity. So you can think about your own target and where you are and where you need to go. So I would call this, any kind of reflective activity is what I would call definitely a self-regulation type activity. And again, if you have questions or comments, you're welcome to put them into the chat, or you can open up the mic anytime we take little breaks like this. Okay, so as you can see, people have typed a lot of different things. A lot of people typed feedback. I can see growth mindset, context, a few people, practice, practice, practice. Giving feedback to students, developing curiosity, have your learners know their target, their objective, or the aim for the lesson, collaboration, cooperation, etc. Okay, can you hear me okay? I'm getting someone who says they can't hear me.
Yes, I can hear.
All right, that's good.
Yes.
If one can hear me, everybody can hear me. Okay, so let's move on to the next part, which is motivation. And this one is a shorter part. That first part is quite long, and I think I have enough time to do the motivation piece. Remember that I'm going to cover these 4 main topics: cognition, which we're done with, motivation, which is coming up, and in part 2, 2 weeks from now, emotional intelligence and assessment. And again, this is basics of. I'm not really doing deep dives into things. This is a general overview of everything. So I hope that you didn't come thinking we would talk deeply about any of these topics. I do try to focus on some topics, but this one is kind of a core general overview of everything that I want to be able to talk about type of webinar. So with that said, what motivates learners? That's the question we're going to ask and talk about over the next 30 minutes or so. Okay, what motivates learners? And there's 4 things that I want to talk about: intrinsic motivation, mastery versus performance motivation, the influence of teacher expectations on motivation, and the influence of goal setting on motivation. Okay. This one I am going to do, what I want to do here, I'm trying to decide. Oh, I set this one for 8 minutes. Okay, because of the time, I'm going to skip this because 8 minutes is too much. Okay, give me just a second. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you in the chat. So I'm changing my plan just a little bit because of the time I have. So I want to ask you into the chat, if you know any or all of these 4, can you just either open up your mic or type into the chat and let me know what you know about these things. What is intrinsic motivation? What does it mean, mastery versus performance? How are teacher expectations important? What about goal setting? So I just want to check what you know first before I go ahead, although I will go ahead over everything. Does anyone want to start?
Intrinsic is when you want to actually do something for yourself. No one has to make you. You're curious within yourself.
Okay, and Shabnam has also said the same thing, showing student interest. So learning things for the sake of learning, because you like learning. Motivation from within. Motivation that comes from you. Okay? And I will talk about this in a little more depth. What about mastery versus performance, teacher expectations, goal setting? Anyone want to talk about those? Lukman writes, process about what is next. I think someone is trying to talk, but I can't hear you very well. It's probably better to use the chat. Abdul says, mastery is the knowledge level in one subject or topic. I'm thinking of something different, but the idea of a level is not, it is maybe part of it, yes. But the definition I'm thinking of and what I'm going to talk about is slightly different. Oh, and goal setting, as far as thinking about what is next, I'm also thinking of something slightly different. Well, but maybe what you're saying is also correct. I'm thinking the way I'm going to explain it is slightly different. Shabnam, command on your subject and delivering class. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Teacher expectations are ideas teachers hold about the potential achievement of students. Okay, yes, Lukman, I'll definitely get into that and talk a little about that. Okay, so everybody's expressed a little bit of knowledge about each of these subjects, so I will talk through them fairly quickly. So intrinsic motivation. Learners tend to enjoy learning and perform better when they want to learn for the sake of learning. Motivation comes from within, and as many of you have said, it's generated by the learner. There is no external pressure to learn that thing. It doesn't come from any outside source at all. It comes from the learner who wants to learn about something on their own for the sake of learning, because they want to learn it. So I love to learn languages, although I never get to a good level, but I usually say to people, hey, I can speak 5 languages, which is true to some extent. But for example, my Japanese, upper intermediate, I lived in Kenya for 2 years, so my Swahili is pretty good, but it's not working proficiency Swahili. Still, I can survive, I can get around, I can move around in any countries in East Africa where Swahili is spoken. I also speak some French, but my French is survival French. I can go to France, I can get around. Yeah, nzuri sana bwana. Unajua Kiswahili nzuri. Nafurahi sana. And I can do that in France. I also lived in Mexico for a couple months, so I have very tiny bit of survival Spanish. So yes, I can say I speak 5 languages. It sounds impressive, but in fact, English is the only language where I have a working professional proficiency. But I like to study languages, and I've studied maybe 7 or 8. I've studied Navajo. I've studied, I've studied a couple of artificial languages like Esperanto, and there's one other, I think it's called, I can't remember. Anyway, I really love studying languages a little bit, not a lot, but that's where my intrinsic motivation tends to focus on things like language learning. And my profession has mainly been as an English language teacher, so I really like to talk about how people learn languages and how teachers teach languages. Okay, we're going to play a game. Pac-Man, does anyone know Pac-Man? Have you played it before?
No.
I loved it as a kid.
Okay, Tasha, when you say you loved it as a kid, you're telling me how old you are. That means you're close to my age. Be careful with that. Be careful with that. Okay, so I'm going to play the game, and I want you to watch me play the game, because then you're going to play the game. But let me play the game first. Okay, I already have it pulled up here. You can see it on the screen. Okay, this game, when I was about 18 years old, it came out in 1980. Now you're calculating and saying, oh, okay, that guy's pretty old. Dr. Larry, he's an old guy, isn't he? Anyway, and to play this game, you had to have a quarter of a US dollar, 25 cents. You had to have a quarter. And to play one time, you play, you get 3 lives. If you lose, you put in another quarter, and you keep feeding in quarter after quarter after quarter. And how many hundreds of quarters did I spend when I was 19 years old playing this game and other games like it? Anyway, now I can play it for free forever on the internet, so I'm really happy. So here we go. I'm just clicking my mouse to start. And I'm using my, I'll show you in a second. So I got this little yellow guy, and he's eating these buttons.
Ah, I know.
There we go. Now I can eat them back. I can get revenge. Let's see if I can get this guy. No, too late. Okay. Oh, I'm getting better at this game. No, no, no. It's okay. I have 2 more lives. You have to eat. You have to eat all these white dots on the screen. Oh, that guy's gonna chase me. I saw you. I'm getting better. I want that cherry. Oh, I got 100 points. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. The sound's having a little problem now. Let's just play one more round. Let's see how I do. Oh, okay, so my 3 lives died. So I used to play this game all the time. I spent so much money, many quarters. Okay. Anyway, you want to try the game now? You ready to try it? Yes, there is a reason we're playing this game. So, all right, here you go. You should be able now to pop this out and play it. Go ahead and play. Click and play. And when you lose, just come back and type in the chat that you're ready to go on. Try it out. Okay, so at least 2 of you have finished. How about the rest of you? I hope you had fun playing that. Yes, there's a reason. I'm just going to move on, so let's go. There's a reason why I wanted you to play the game and experience it just a little bit. Because Pac-Man is very interesting because it's about a certain experience you have, and it's about motivation and motivating learners. And this thing called experience design. Oh, sorry, I need to move back. Okay, so I'm going to show you another movie. This one is about 4 minutes long. And watch for the 3 rules of experience design. If you're ready to go, are you ready to watch? I don't know, some of you maybe are still playing. I'm going to assume you stop playing the game. Okay, here comes the movie. I know it's a little bit small on the screen, but here we go.
Hi, I'm Jill Butler, and this is the Universal Principles of Design. In this movie, Flow, or the power of getting people in the zone. The video game Pac-Man was developed by Namco and introduced to American audiences in October of 1980. Gameplay is simple. Players use a joystick to guide a yellow pie-shaped character through a maze while eating dots and avoiding ghosts. Instantly popular, Pac-Man became the highest-grossing arcade game of all time, taking in over $2.5 billion. That's 10 billion quarters. Pac-Man was also an icon of 1980s pop culture and inspired songs, spin-off arcade games, animated television shows, and a lot of game-themed merchandise. This quick, dramatic success completely surprised competitors and distributors. At the time of Pac-Man's release, the most popular arcade games were space shooters like Space Invaders and Asteroids. And so pre-release excitement surrounding Pac-Man was so low that industry executives ignored the game when it first debuted. What made Pac-Man such a success? How did a yellow, dot-munching maze runner catch so many gaming professionals off guard and change the world of video games forever? There are a number of factors that contributed to Pac-Man's rapid rise in popularity, and most have to do with the design of the game. Early stages are easy to play and get progressively more difficult. This helps balance game challenges and player skill. Goals are clear. Feedback is immediate and unambiguous. There are multiple layers of rewards or nested schedules of reinforcement. Or stated more simply, the success of Pac-Man can be attributed to a psychological state known as flow. Flow is a state of problem immersion so complete that awareness of the real world is lost. If you've ever been so involved in a task that you forgot to eat a meal, or you were surprised to realize that hours had passed, then you've experienced flow. The phenomenon was popularized by a Hungarian psychologist with a unique name. If you've seen or read the book Flow and wondered how the author's name is pronounced, here you go. It is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. The key to entering a flow state is finding the right balance between task difficulty and skill level. If there's a mismatch between these two, flow will not occur. So, for example, when a task is easy and skill level is low, you get apathy. When a task is too hard and a person's skill level is too low, you get anxiety and worry. And when a task is too easy and a person's skill level is too high, you get relaxation and boredom. Now, when task difficulty and skill levels start to increase and they're roughly matched, you get arousal, interest, and an increased sense of control. And when you get both high difficulty and high skill level, you're there. You get flow. Flow only occurs when a task is just difficult enough that a person is challenged at or near their maximum skill level. Consider flow in the design of educational, browsing, and entertainment experiences. The foundation of flow is challenging interactions that require continuous engagement. And this is achieved by incorporating 3 key elements in experience design. Number 1, matching difficulty to skill level. And number 2, creating a clear hierarchy of goals with little goals that build incrementally toward higher level goals. And number 3, providing clear and immediate feedback. So whether you use your knowledge of flow to improve the productivity and enjoyment of job tasks, to immerse visitors in a museum exhibit or a website experience, or to design the next mega hit video game, remember the power of getting people in the zone.
Okay. So I first heard of the concept of flow about 10 years ago as being an important factor in motivating students. So I tend to talk about this as much as possible, that intrinsic motivation, again, comes from setting it up so that your learners' motivation, the way you set up your activities will influence your learners' motivation. And that means, again, matching the difficulty of the task you give them to their level of skill. And it means creating a hierarchy of goals with small goals first that build up very slowly and incrementally to higher goals and higher level goals. And at all times providing this feedback that we've already talked about, which should be clear and immediate. So if you're thinking of student motivation, I would say these are the 3 big steps that we learned from this game from 30, how many years ago was it? From a long time ago, 30 years ago. And I made my own little chart that, remember, we want to match the level of their knowledge or skill or competence or ability with the challenge that we have. And if you do it right, you get them in this flow zone, what we call being in the zone. And that's where they're focused and happy. And that's where we want our students to be, because that's where the most powerful learning is going to take place, when they're focused and they're happy. And again, there's yet another TED Talk. You can click on this one. This brings you out to Mr. Csikszentmihalyi, who, and this one is a very old talk also from February 2004, but it's called Flow, the Secret of Happiness. And it's, again, a very popular video on TED. And I highly recommend you watch this. It's a good background, and delve into this whole field of how flow, designing things for flow are a great way of getting, motivating your students a lot more. I also do have, I also do a presentation on flow, which I haven't put up lately, but I will be doing a workshop where we focus specifically on flow and activities that match flow. Next, we get to mastering performance. And I've made this little matrix because what we want to do is we want our students to, in order to motivate them to think of mastering something rather than performing well in something, because there's a difference, and I'm just going to read in the top left corner. Persistence and ability to process information improves when learners adopt mastery goals, not performance goals. And there are 2 ways you orient toward mastery. There's the approach-oriented, or what you move forward to. And again, when you have a mastery goal, you're motivated to master tasks for the sake of mastering them. Again, it's related to intrinsic motivation. You want to be able to do something in order to be able to do it, not to make you better than other people. Whereas if you have a performance goal, you're motivated to demonstrate your knowledge, skill, competence, or ability, because to show that you are better than other people in doing that thing. And we want to get people away from performance and into just mastering for the sake of being a master at it. And then people will avoid something for 2 different reasons. If they have mastery goals, they avoid things because they don't want to misunderstand any given task. So if they don't want to do it, it's because they don't fully understand why they're supposed to do something. So if you can help clear things up, good, then they'll go and they'll do that task for the sake of doing that task and for the sake of being the best they can be at doing that task. Not the performance goal where they're motivated to avoid appearing ignorant, stupid, non-skilled, incompetent, or disabled in the eyes of others. Remember, people who have a performance goal orientation aren't really worried about being the best they can be. They just want to be better than everybody else. And I think the best metaphor for the difference between mastery and performance is the Olympics. If you think about the Olympics, yes, somebody gets a gold medal, somebody gets a silver medal, somebody gets the bronze medal. Those people all are the best performers. But there are many people who go to the Olympics with one goal in mind, and that's, for example, to run the fastest they've ever run before. And even though they're not the fastest person in the world, if they can get a time that's the fastest they've ever done by themselves, this is mastery thinking, mastery goal thinking. If they happen to be number one in the world, that's great. But if you get a gold medal, but you still didn't beat your fastest time, there's going to be a little bit of disappointment. Even though you're first place, you're the best in the world, you still didn't do your best for yourself. You still might have finished second to yourself, or third to yourself, or worse. So you'll find that athletes going to the Olympics who do their best, even if they don't get a medal, they love the experience and they know they tried the hardest and they came out with a personal best record. And I think that's the big difference between mastery and performance. Teacher expectations. The general rule of teacher expectations is that teacher expectations about their learners affects learners' opportunities to learn and their motivation and their learning outcomes. So I do have a story to explain this one a little bit more. It's called the myth of Pygmalion. Does anyone know this myth? Okay, I have two no's. And everybody else stop paying attention, maybe? We're running too long? Okay, so the myth of Pygmalion is this. I don't know, I think it's either Greek or Roman. It's about 2,000 years old. It comes from a long time ago with the Greek or Roman gods and the religion where people believed in these gods. And apparently Pygmalion was a sculptor, an artist, and one day he got a very large piece of ivory and he carved out his ideal of the most beautiful woman on earth. And he loved it so much and did such a great job that he fell in love with his carving as if it were a real woman. And then one of the gods looked down and saw it and magically turned that ivory sculpture into a real woman. And Pygmalion was awarded with his dream woman in the world. So so we have this thing called the Pygmalion effect. And again, the idea is that people are influenced by the expectations put upon them by others. So if you have high expectations for your students, they are going to perform better. If you have low expectations for your students, they are going to perform exactly as you think they are. If you think they're going to perform low, that's how they're going to perform. If you think they're going to perform high, they may not reach high, but they'll reach higher than if you think they're going to be low. So your expectations as a teacher has a very profound influence on your learners when they're learning. Always do your best to keep your expectations high for them. I think we all need to approach every student we have as someone who is a potential superstar, and it's our job to help them find what they are best at and to pursue that road. That's why something like a sign like this is something you want to aim for. So I'm just going to read this. A very effective classroom management, especially in primary schools and middle schools, maybe not so much high school uh, or university level, but effective classroom management is based on communicating high expectations and nurturing positive relationships and providing support for better learning. So a lot of primary classrooms in the US especially will have this kind of poster up on the wall so that the kids will see it. And it says, as you can see, when you enter this room, learning is fun, cooperation is expected, our positive attitude and mutual respect are part of everything we say and do. And this is the acronym WELCOME to make everybody feel welcome in class. So this type of sign and this type of statement, all of your students read it, and it conveys that you are open and welcoming and supporting of them to be their best possible, and that you are there to get them to achieve whatever goals that they want to be able to achieve, or even to achieve the goals you expect them to achieve. So you definitely should think of the Pygmalion effect when you're in your classroom. Every student you need to look at in the most positive light and push them to achieve their best. And I have another video on this that I found, but I'm not going to play that video. I'm just going to skip over that. This is my last point for motivation, which is goal setting. The best way to do goal setting for learning is to focus on the short term and to be very specific in the short term that you set. And again, to set the level of the challenge to meet the student's knowledge, skill, competence, or ability. And again, you want them in that flow zone. You want to make sure that the goals will keep them in the zone. So again, short term is a better way to plan. Being as specific as possible is important, and keeping them in the zone. Okay, so I have a little quiz for this one. I'm going to show you two goals, and I want you to tell me this is not goal setting or this is goal setting. And I have two examples here, okay? Not goal setting, goal setting. And you have 45 seconds for each. So here's the first one. So I like to eat, and you can't see below here, but I have kind of a big belly. So if I said, I need to lose 50 pounds, or I need to lose 25 kilos, or 50 pounds, is that goal setting or not goal setting? What do you think? So just vote as either goal setting or not. I'm just going to click A, just click A, and submit. I might not be right. Just 10 seconds. Okay, time is up. So we have, interestingly, we have a little bit of a mixed response, but most of you said not goal setting. Can one of you who said not goal setting tell me why this is not goal setting?
You didn't.
Sorry, can you open your mic again? One more
I'm
time.
sorry. I'm sorry. You didn't say how you would go ahead and achieve your goal. Like, what steps would you take to get there?
Okay, so this is, there's no time limit set. And I would also say in terms of flow, being in the zone, I think this is a target that looks really, really high and very long term and no way to get there, okay? Let's try this one. Again, you have 45 seconds. Is this goal setting or not goal setting? I need to eat sensibly and exercise daily so that I lose 5 kilograms in the next 2 months. Would you call this goal setting or not goal setting? And again, I'm just going to click A and submit. That's right, Amira. I'm just wishing to lose it. I don't have any specific plan to get to where I'm going. It's just a larger and unachievable and unrealistic thing in the short term, right? Okay. So here is our result for number 2. And look at that. Everybody who answered, some people did not answer, but everyone who answered said this is goal setting. Why? Because it's shorter term, it's very specific, and if I eat sensibly, and that's actually hard for me, makudonado do hambaga, right? But if I eat sensibly and exercise daily, although with COVID I'm stuck in my apartment, it's kind of hard to exercise for me too. But if I can do that, within 2 months I can lose 5 kilos. I think this is something that is, as Alicia points out, achievable, and there's a time period put onto that. So when you're setting your goals for your students, same thing, keep it short, easily achievable. Think about getting them into that zone, and this is the way you're going to motivate them. Okay, so again, I need to lose 50 kilos is not really goal setting versus I need to eat sensibly, etc. And that'll take us there. Okay, so that's everything about motivation. That was a lot shorter than cognition. We talked about 4 main things in motivation. Mastery and performance. We talked about the flow zone. We talked about setting goals realistically. And again, I forgot the first one. Oh, it's been a long day. I'm a little tired. So if you can type in a word or 2 as a kind of a takeaway for motivation. And the time is 4:30, so I'm going to end this in less than 5 minutes. We'll be done. I just want to get this from you. I know all of you have been in the zone at one time or another. I like doing these workshops because I like to design my slides, and I like to think about the experiences I can give to people. And when I'm thinking about and working on this, I can easily spend 6 to 8 hours, but I can look up and say, oh, it was 6 to 8 hours. It felt like 10 minutes. When you get that feeling, you know you're in that flow zone, and you know you've been very highly intrinsically motivated. And that's what we want to get our students to do. Find something that really motivates them and to be the best at that, not to show that they're better than others, but to be the best personally. So all of these things that you're writing here can help with that. I don't think I talked about SMART goals. Well, I kind of talked about SMART goals a little bit. This was a simplified version of that. All right, so good, thanks for that. And we're pretty much done, so thanks for coming today. We did it, we got to our 2 hours, basics of teaching and learning, cognition and motivation. Remember that part 2 is coming up. Let me tell you about the next 3 that I'm doing. July 5th, I'm going to do a super deep dive into the growth mindset and let you play with that a lot more. That's coming on Sunday, a week from tomorrow. And then 2 weeks from today, July 11th, I'm going to do real simple stuff about mind mapping. And again, if you already know about mind mapping, don't come, you'll get bored. Unless you like looking at interactive lessons, because I do try to make things interactive. And then part 2 of this one, where we look at emotional intelligence and assessment in basics of teaching and learning. We'll look at that and note the times for the Saturday sessions. The first one starts at 11 a.m. Abu Dhabi time, and the next one starts at 5 p.m. So I've really spaced those. I've spaced those about 6 hours apart, and you can register for them. For those of you who paid for an attendance certificate today, I will be sending that out to you probably next weekend when I'm doing other administrative stuff for this. And for everybody else, I do ask, this is only, it's just an appeal. You're not forced to do it, but I do, I would like to get people to donate a small amount of money, and then I can send you certificates. And you can do that through Eventbrite when you purchase your tickets. I have about 3 or 4 options. And I would actually encourage you to invite 4 of your colleagues, and then instead of paying $6 for one seat, you pay for 5 people, you pay $18 US. So that's a little over $3, I think, $3.50, $4. And if you can invite 9 other colleagues, you pay $30. That's $3 each. So that's a 50% off. So 40% off if you can invite 4 others and there's 5 of you, or 50% if there are 10. That's still not a lot of money, but I do, and then I'll give you all a bunch of certificates, and I'm getting a little bit for my time. I'm not here to become a multimillionaire. I just want to be able to put a little bit of value on the time I'm doing. So please, I do ask in future, if you do join these sessions, there are a couple of free seats, but most of the seats I want to get people to pay just a little, and then you'll get a really nice certificate that you can show for professional development purposes. Because on the certificate, I put the amount of time you've spent, like 120 minutes. This is a 2-hour session, so you get that kind of thing. So I do appreciate if you can do that. I would prefer that you bring in more colleagues and we talk about those things. And if you want any other private consulting stuff and your school has some budget for a more professional trainer, I mean, I'm your guy, I think. And you can check out on through Facebook. Just type Teak Learning, look for Teak Learning and like that website. And I think I'm also on Twitter. And I will be uploading this video to YouTube very shortly, and you can check that out too. For certificates today, I would say if you sign up sometime in the future or send me an email or something, we'll try to figure out how to do that. I don't think you can go back today and pay for a ticket, and it's okay if you didn't pay today, don't worry about it. Just do it in the future, that's fine. Again, I'm not here to be a multimillionaire, but I do want just a tiny bit of compensation coming up in the future. And I would prefer that you network out to your friends and get them to come in, and that helps me to develop more of these sessions also. And I'm thinking of other ways to develop sessions, and I also know that schools don't have a lot of money to pay external trainers or professional development specialists. So I'm always willing to work out some kind of budgets, because I do want to continue doing these free sessions if I can have that other part where I can get some consulting fees from. I'd rather get money from your institution than from you, because your institution should have some money to vote to some professional development. So with that said, that's all. My commercial is over. Yes?
Where may I find your email?
My email is coming right up in the chat, and you can, if you want to talk to me more about things, this is fine. teaklearning.org. Okay, so it's Larry.Davies, and be careful of my last name. A lot of people spell it D-A-V-I-S. If you send it to Larry Davis, nobody's going to get it. So watch out for that E in my last name at teaklearning.org. And again, Teak Learning is my private consulting company. I have a partner located in Connecticut in the USA. We're incorporated. The company is incorporated in the USA. So when you pay me, it actually goes to the USA into our business account, which I then use to advertise on Facebook for these sessions to get more people. So with that said, I'm going to stop the recording and thank you. And this recording will be uploaded very shortly, I think. I'll let you know. So again,
Thank you.